The envelope looked ceremonial. Cream paper, embossed initials, a faint scent of something floral that didn't belong to my apartment or my life. For a moment I thought it was the invitation. Not because my brother and I were especially close, but because invitations usually arrive before weddings. Inside was a printed card with a schedule. No name. No seat assignment. No RSVP. Just information. I stared at it longer than necessary, like something might rearrange itself if I waited. But the wording remained polite and distant: ceremony at 4, reception at 7, private family dinner afterward. Private family. The phrase didn't land immediately. It drifted, hovered, then settled somewhere uncomfortable. A week earlier, I had wired the final payment for the house. $770,000. A quiet suburban place with pale siding, wide windows, and a kitchen my brother had once described over coffee as the kind of space where real life happens. He'd said it casually, but I remembered it because he rarely talked about wanting things. Buying it hadn't felt like generosity. It felt like restoration. We grew up in a house where I was the dependable one, the older sibling who worked part-time jobs, filled out forms, handled logistics while our parents navigated instability in quieter ways. Responsibility followed me into adulthood the same way some people carry hobbies. So when my business stabilized and money became less fragile, I used it the way I'd always used effort, to close gaps. The house was supposed to close one. My parents' call came 2 days after the envelope. "It's going to be small," my mother said, her voice careful in the way people speak when they believe they're being reasonable. "Just immediate family. You understand. Immediate family." I almost asked for clarification but didn't. Questions sometimes reveal answers you're not prepared to hear spoken aloud. Later that night, my brother called. I told myself it was coincidence. "You got the details, right?" he asked. I did. A pause stretched between us, thin but noticeable. "It's only for the closest family," he said, followed by a soft laugh that sounded less like humor and more like dismissal. "You know how weddings are." I murmured something neutral. I don't remember what. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and watched the city outside my window move through its usual choreography: headlights, late buses, people carrying grocery bags, life continuing with indifference. For years, I believed reliability created proximity. That if you showed up consistently enough, helped quietly enough, gave generously enough, you eventually earned an unspoken membership. But belonging, I was realizing, isn't a cumulative reward. It's a perception. And perceptions rarely come with receipts. The house keys were still in my desk drawer. I drove there the next morning. The neighborhood was silent in the way new developments often are: pristine sidewalks, identical lawns, the faint echo of distant construction. Inside, the house smelled like paint and emptiness. Sunlight stretched across the hardwood floors. The kitchen counters were bare. Cabinet doors opened to reveal nothing but potential. I walked from room to room like a guest in a museum exhibit titled Future Life. Here was where holiday dinners might happen. Here was where arguments might cool into apologies. Here was where ordinary Tuesday evenings might quietly accumulate into memory. But none of those moments existed yet. And suddenly, I wasn't sure they ever would. I sat on the living room floor for a long time, leaning against a wall that technically belonged to me but had never felt mine. The question forming wasn't dramatic. It was practical. What does a gift mean when the relationship it was meant to nurture doesn't exist in the same way? I didn't feel angry. Anger implies injustice. This felt more like clarity. By afternoon, I had called an agent. She didn't ask many questions. Professionals rarely do when paperwork is clear. The process moved quickly: photographs, listing, calls, negotiations. Each step felt administrative rather than emotional, like updating contact information after a move. In parallel, wedding preparations unfolded elsewhere. I imagined tailored suits, floral arrangements, laughter during rehearsals. Not with resentment, but with a distant curiosity, like observing a celebration through glass. On the morning of the wedding, I signed the final documents. The buyers were a young couple expecting their first child. They spoke excitedly about nursery colors and backyard barbecues. Their anticipation filled the empty rooms more convincingly than any staged furniture could. When I handed over the keys, the moment carried a quiet finality. Not triumph. Not revenge. Just alignment. That evening, while vows were exchanged across town, I ate dinner alone at a small restaurant where no one knew me. The waiter refilled my water without conversation. A television above the bar played muted sports highlights. My phone remained silent. Around 9, a message arrived from my cousin. They went to see the house. I read it twice. Another message followed. You sold it. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I pictured the scene unfolding, dressed guests stepping onto the familiar driveway, laughter fading as unfamiliar cars occupied the curb, lights glowing behind windows that now belonged to strangers. Later, my cousin called. They thought you were joking, he said gently. Until the new owners opened the door. I imagined my parents standing still, my brother searching for context, relatives exchanging glances that carried more questions than answers. And the bride? I asked. There was a pause. She didn't say much, he replied. Just, understood. The call ended without drama. Near midnight, another notification appeared. A number I didn't recognize. I'm sorry, the message read. Not for the house. For the misunderstanding about family. It was signed with her name. I stared at the screen, surprised by the steadiness in my chest. Her message didn't repair anything, but it acknowledged something real, the quiet fracture that polite language often conceals. I typed back slowly. I hope the house becomes what you both wanted it to be, wherever that is. No accusation. No explanation. Just truth. Days passed. Life resumed its familiar rhythm of meetings, grocery lists, morning coffee, evening walks. The wedding photos appeared online, smiling faces, soft lighting, carefully composed joy. I scrolled past them without lingering. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't belong to me. One evening, I opened my desk drawer and noticed the absence of keys. The empty space where they had rested felt symbolic in a way I hadn't anticipated. For years, I believed love within families functioned like property, transferable, expandable, secured through investment. Now I understood it more like residency. You can contribute to a place without living there. You can maintain a structure without occupying it. And sometimes, leaving doesn't require departure. It requires recognition. I stood by my window, watching the city dissolve into night. Somewhere, my brother and his wife were beginning their shared life, perhaps discussing furniture, honeymoon plans, ordinary details that stitch days together. I wished them well. Not performatively. Simply. Because self-worth, I was learning, doesn't depend on being chosen. It depends on choosing yourself when the invitation never arrives. And in that quiet realization, there was no celebration. Only relief.